Resident Evil Requiem EA return to pure survival horror. The fear returns. If there's one franchise that defines survival horror, it's Resident Evil. From fixed camera nightmares to over-the-shoulder reinvention, from action-heavy chaos to first-person terror, Capcom has never been afraid to reinvent this series. But with Resident Evil Requiem, Capcom isn't just reinventing Resident Evil again, they're recentering it. Requiem feels like a culmination, a game that takes the dread of classic RE, the immersion of modern entries, and the emotional weight of its recent storytelling, and blends them into something slower, darker, and far more oppressive than expected. This isn't a power fantasy. This isn't a roller coaster shooter. This is Resident Evil at its most suffocating. So after finishing Resident Evil Requiem, here's my full, spoiler-light 20-minute breakdown, covering gameplay, story, horror design, enemies, visuals, sound, and whether this is one of the strongest Resident Evil games Capcom has ever made. Story and setting: a world in mourning. Resident Evil Requiem earns its name immediately. The tone is somber. This isn't about stopping a bombastic global outbreak or punching bioweapons into lava. This is about aftermath, loss, and things that refuse to stay buried. Without spoilers, the game is set in a location deeply scarred by biological disaster. A place that feels abandoned not just physically, but emotionally. The environment itself tells the story. Boarded windows, personal notes, makeshift shrines, and signs that people tried to survive and didn't. The narrative leans heavily into environmental storytelling. You're not constantly hit with cutscenes. Instead, you piece together what happened through audio logs, journals, and disturbing visual clues. And importantly, Requiem slows things down. The story doesn't rush. It lingers. It lets tension breathe. Characters feel more vulnerable, more human. There's less quippy dialogue and more silence, the kind that makes you uncomfortable. It's not about saving the world. It's about surviving long enough to understand the truth. Gameplay core, survival over power. If you're coming into Resident Evil Requiem expecting high-octane action, adjust your expectations. This is a survival-first game. Ammo is scarce. Healing items are limited. Enemies are durable and unpredictable. Combat feels deliberate, almost hesitant by design. You're not encouraged to clear rooms. You're encouraged to avoid fights whenever possible. Enemy encounters often feel like puzzles. Do you spend precious bullets? Do you lure them away? Do you barricade a door and hope it holds? Movement is weighty. Reloading under pressure feels terrifying again. Even opening your inventory doesn't feel safe. Capcom clearly wanted every encounter to feel costly, and it works. This is the kind of Resident Evil where running is often smarter than fighting. Every missed shot hurts, and mistakes snowball fast. It's stressful in the best way. Level design and exploration, a maze of dread. Resident Evil Requiem absolutely nails level design. The game leans heavily into interconnected spaces, looping shortcuts, locked doors, and backtracking, but never in a frustrating way. Every area feels purposefully claustrophobic, layered with verticality, designed to make you feel watched. You'll return to familiar areas multiple times, but circumstances change. Lighting shifts, enemy placements evolve, safe routes become dangerous. The map design constantly messes with your sense of security. What was once a safe hallway becomes a death trap. What felt dangerous earlier becomes your only escape later. Puzzles return in a big way, and thankfully they're smart puzzles, not busywork. They require observation, memory, and sometimes courage to revisit terrifying locations. Exploration is rewarded, but never without risk. Horror design, fear through restraint. This is where Resident Evil Requiem truly shines. The horror isn't loud. It's not jump scare heavy. The psychological, oppressive, and constant. Sound design does most of the work. Distant footsteps, unidentifiable breathing, metal scraping in walls. Often, you'll hear something long before you see it, and sometimes you never see it at all. Lighting is minimal and cruel. Your flashlight never feels strong enough. Shadows play tricks on your eyes. Enemy encounters are unpredictable. Some creatures stalk rather than chase. Others disappear and reappear without warning. There's a persistent feeling that the game is watching you, waiting for you to slip up. This is fear built through restraint, and it's incredibly effective. Enemies and bosses. Less is more. Resident Evil Requiem uses its enemies sparingly, and that's exactly why they're terrifying. Regular enemies are dangerous not because they swarm you, but because they refuse to die easily. Boss encounters are fewer than in action-heavy entries, but each one is memorable. They're mechanically unique, heavily tied to the story, and often more about survival than damage output. Some boss fights aren't about winning, they're about escaping alive. Enemy variety is strong, but Capcom avoids overusing any single threat. When a new creature appears, it feels meaningful. Nothing feels disposable. Visuals and performance, beauty in decay. Visually, Resident Evil Requiem is stunning. The RE engine continues to be one of the best in the industry. Hyper-detailed environments, realistic lighting, incredible facial animations. But what stands out most is the art direction. Everything feels decayed but lived in. There's a grounded realism mixed with grotesque horror. Character models convey exhaustion, fear, and trauma without a single word of dialogue. Performance-wise, the game is smooth and stable, with minimal loading and strong optimization across platforms. It's not flashy for the sake of it. It's immersive. Music and sound. The unsung hero, the soundtrack in Resident Evil Requiem deserves serious praise. Music is used sparingly. Often, there's none at all. When music does kick in, it's subtle, low drones, distorted strings, distant echoes. It heightens tension rather than overpowering it. Sound cues are critical to gameplay. Enemy proximity, environmental danger, story beats. This is a game you should absolutely play with headphones. Final verdict, is Requiem worth it? Resident Evil Requiem isn't trying to please everyone, and that's its greatest strength. This is a slow, methodical, fear-driven survival horror game that respects the player's intelligence and patience. If you love classic Resident Evil tension, modern atmospheric horror, scarcity-based gameplay, psychological dread over action, then Resident Evil Requiem is one of the strongest entries in the franchise. It may frustrate players looking for constant action, but for survival horror fans, this is Capcom operating at the top of their game. Resident Evil Requiem feels like a love letter to fear itself. If you enjoyed this deep dive, drop a like, subscribe for more survival horror reviews, and let me know where Resident Evil Requiem ranks for you in the series.